Welcome back to Midnight Digital Decay. In 1964, a small town in rural West Virginia called Crescent Pines vanished from government records. It wasn't due to some overt disaster or political reshuffling. The town didn't explode, collapse, or get swallowed by the earth. It simply disappeared from the collective consciousness. The inhabitants, all 673 of them, went on with their lives, unaware that they had been erased. What led to this vanishing was an institution that had long haunted the town: the Silent Court. Crescent Pines had always been an isolated place nestled deep in the Appalachians. Generations of its residents had lived their lives without much change, but there was always one constant: a courthouse that sat on the outskirts of the town, older than any of its inhabitants could remember. Its wooden walls and Gothic architecture seemed out of place in such a humble location, but none of the locals ever questioned it. They knew what it was for. Every few years, like clockwork, someone from the town would be called to the Silent Court. There was no rhyme or reason to who was summoned. Farmers, teachers, business owners, the young, the elderly. It could be anyone. And once summoned, they would be taken to trial. No charges were ever mentioned, no crime ever named. But all who were summoned to the Silent Court knew that the outcome was inevitable. They would be found guilty. The court's inner workings were shrouded in mystery. No one ever spoke of it openly, but there were whispered stories passed down through families about what happened inside those dark walls. The Silent Court operated under laws that no human hand had ever written. The judges were not men, but shadows, tall black figures that moved without sound and communicated through gestures and symbols. Witnesses described the feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by something far deeper, something that could peer into the very soul. Those who were found guilty, and all who entered the court eventually wouldn't face death or imprisonment. Instead, they simply vanished. Not physically, but in every other sense. They would return home to their families, to their jobs, but they would be different. Over time, their faces would blur in the minds of those who knew them. Their names would slip from memory, even for their closest friends and family. It was as if they had been wiped from existence. They could speak, they could act, they could even scream, but no one would remember them long enough to care. In 1957, an outsider named Alice Monroe, a reporter for a regional newspaper, was the first to investigate the strange occurrences in Crescent Pines. She arrived under the guise of writing a human interest story, but her real intention was to uncover why, despite its size and location, the town had no verifiable history past 1912. There were no birth or death records, no land deeds, nothing. Alice interviewed residents and found a disturbing consistency in their stories. Everyone knew about the Silent Court, though no one dared to speak of it. The more she dug, the more it became clear that the court had always been there, and it had always been passing judgment. One evening, Alice received an unexpected letter delivered to her motel door. It was a single sheet of paper, its ink smudged but legible. "You are summoned to the Silent Court." Desperate to get to the truth, Alice attended the trial, a process that no outsider had ever witnessed and lived to speak of. Her notes, found weeks later in her abandoned motel room, tell of a nightmare beyond human comprehension. According to her final writings, Alice described a room filled with a choking fog, the walls lined with symbols she couldn't recognize but which filled her with an unspeakable dread. She was brought before a panel of shadowy judges, their faces indistinct, their forms more like twisted silhouettes than men. They did not speak, yet she understood the charges laid against her. She had sought to uncover the truth. Her trial lasted mere minutes, yet she felt as though years had passed. In her final note, Alice wrote, "I have seen my own future. They've erased me, yet I still remain. I am no longer alive in the way you would understand, but I have not died either. I am a thought, suspended." After her disappearance, Crescent Pines was wiped from the maps, the records, and even from memory. The town itself remained physically intact. But its people, its history, and its identity ceased to exist in the minds of anyone outside its borders. The Silent Court had rendered its final judgment, and the punishment was far-reaching. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more of this content. It lets me know people enjoy it, and motivates me to continue to create it for you all. If you haven't already, check out my link tree in the description for more esoterica.